The people that were basically owning the process and owning the people development, they were not responsible for the delivery. And so the product owners who were responsible for the delivery, they didn't own their team process. And then when things weren't looking up, then basically there was a lot of finger pointing that the process doesn't work or the delivery is not there and so on. And the people as well on the leadership-wise who were basically responsible for designing the process, they weren't a part of the everyday work. Therefore, they were kind of not well equipped to improve those processes. So that meant that basically we needed to go back to the drawing board. Basically be honest, what is actually fitting us, what is our context. Because we were quite a lot trying to copy some of the other organizations that are kind of successful, like Spotify's and Netflix's and so on. But taking their sort of operating model and implementing it like one-to-one into our context and organization wasn't working that well. So it was basically really understanding what kind of elements of these practices are working for us and what not. Based on that, basically figuring out what kind of organization we want to be, what's our end game, and also what are the guiding principles that are basically helping us to work together. And then last but not least, the execution part of this type of changes, that what are these how we call them, everyday hacks that are actually making this thing real, how we can, with easy, small steps to basically improve and not to do, again, a big life-changing reorganization. So one of the key components now is a context we need to give to the teams. So essentially, what is the user need, or what are the business needs they are working towards? What kind of components are in the value chain to basically how this thing is being kind of played out or realized. Basically the user, and we're using this type of value chain mapping together with the evolution axis for that. Basically up there is the user need, such as you want to have a cup of coffee, and then what kind of components are needed for that, down to the water and electricity down there. And basically the horizontal axis is basically showing the how much known or how much unknown territory we are operating. So down on the left side, there is basically well-known things such as data centers and electricity and stuff like that, or payment services and so on. More on the right side, then there is a context where we don't know much about it yet. I mean, all the self-driving stuff, for instance, lives there, and some of the AI and then machine learning components. And as you see, our dominating context is somewhere in the middle, basically where we build custom products. And the overall thing is to basically move it as much as possible to the left. And why this is important as well is that different type of methods work in different type of contexts. So essentially, somewhere in the middle and more to the genesis part, then the game is basically to reduce the cost of change and to speed up the learning process. Down on the left side, it's more about reducing deviation, being as efficient as possible. And by mapping this down, we also got a new way of looking at our teams. So basically, each of those teams are basically represented on this map. So the teams are also basically formed based on what kind of role they are fulfilling in the value chain. So we have the e-channels or the core process teams or the logistics and sorting and so on. And this map gives them context basically on where they are in the value chain, who's their user, but also who is dependent on them and who are they dependent upon, as well as what is their responsibility area, what kind of skills and competences are necessary for them to operate, and so on. So our end game then, the main thing is that everybody basically knows who is their user, what kind of value they are creating, and how this is measured. So that's the core component. Second thing is that the teams actually have necessary information and resources and as well as authority to basically fulfill their responsibilities. Basically as autonomous or as independent as possible. They own their people, they own their process, they have the business metrics and tech metrics that they're working towards. But also in these autonomous teams, as it is visible here, they are not like being able to operate totally separately. Still, they are fulfilling some role in the value chain, which means that a certain set of principles are necessary for them to work together. Kind of like traffic rules. We call it doctrine. So basically, this is a set of principles that are useful in every context. Best example, I think, is from the military. When you don't know what to do, you find and capture the higher ground. If everybody knows that, then it's much more easier to work together depending on whichever context. So we have listed down things like we always know our users. For instance, we use systematic way of learning, so we have all the retrospectives and things like that. We don't just do things because this is how it's done before, we challenge it. We are not all Agile or all Six Sigma or all Lean or all Kanban or all Scrum. We basically look what is the most useful method based on the context. And as I said, our dominating context is this custom-built products where we basically need to speed up the learning process. Therefore, basically the Agile practices are very useful in that time. However, we still use basically standard projects to, for instance, do some infrastructure lifecycle changes and so on, where this type of upfront planning is actually quite useful. Use small user-focused teams, and we first do the right things and then we do things right. That's also our principle. We try to simplify the problem as much as possible, and we build in these small components all the time. Some organizational changes as well. These are from this year. So basically, I already talked about the teams. So essentially, this is how it looks like now. We have the shared infrastructure down below, and then this user-focused team on top. How do we govern our products? A few words about this as well. There are 4 different levels of planning and tracking. There is this sort of a business vision or the North Stars that are extending approximately 2 to 5 years of time horizon. And there are things like we want to get, I don't know, 2 million subscribers on our e-channel platform, or we want to cut down or increase the efficiency of the courier network by 35%, and there are things like that. That translates down to the business objectives that are then more achievable within a year or so, and we budget against those objectives as well. So essentially, if we want to get, I don't know, 4 million subscribers, then this year we are aiming for, let's say, 2 million of this, then how much budget are we willing to spend in order to achieve that goal? Down from there is our, what we call business initiatives. In other words, it's kind of like a big epic that has a business metric always, or a business goal, and it has the effort tied to it as well. So basically, this is the tool how we work together with business. This is the stuff that we deliver to them. And then it goes down to the epics and stories and tasks and so on. That is like the everyday product development process. We budget as well within 3 categories, basically. We have the technology foundation part, which is necessary for the company to operate. Then we have the product line funding, where all the new features live. And then we have something called experimentation budget as well, where we basically don't know yet what are we going to spend it on, but all the hackathons, for instance, live there, and some of the emerging technologies and so on. This is how it basically scales down, the basically intent, what the business wants to achieve down to the product backlogs. Important is that we can track each of the developers' tasks down to the strategic objective of the company and vice versa as well. So everybody knows that if he's writing that line of code, he already knows what kind of business goal is basically being impacted by that. And I will end with a set of process rules as well. Like I told before that our main problem was we are doing too much things in parallel. Nothing gets done. It's partially done work. Also, we were queuing up things in certain places. So therefore, we basically implemented, or are implementing, I would say, a very simple set of process rules, not a big handbook, but basically a one-pager, which is very much about applying work-in-progress limits. We believe that doing less things at the same time, we actually get more things done. It's also about having very clear definition of ready and definition of done definitions on these business initiatives and epics. So basically we know what has to happen for that stuff to be taken into engineering, and when it's done as well, what is the definition of done. That's extremely important, because what we saw before is that these type of business initiatives were starting to grow. Everything was sort of put underneath it, and that meant again that some stuff was staying there forever. And when it's there forever, then it gets reprioritized. So nothing ever gets done. And basically the whole game is about improving constantly the cycle and lead times, meaning that how quickly we can actually move these business initiatives through that funnel. We want to get basically from next to release with things like, let's say, a new functionality for the parcel machines or the new sorting logic or things like that, up to 3 months. If it gets more than 3 months in our effort, then we cut it down. Nothing can be bigger than 3 months. How do we basically prioritize it is, we looked at, is it bringing us a new revenue? Is it targeting the internal efficiency, or is it something related to compliance? And we do it pretty much like very easily, small, medium, and big, which then reflects like under 50,000, up to 100,000, up to 300,000, and so on. Right. So this is it for me right now. We basically looked at where we came from. We came from a very traditional, a big project-oriented organization where the teams were aligned based on the technology layers. That meant that no business features were done, and people weren't really understanding why are they doing what they're doing. Then we moved into the product-based organization. However, we didn't have few core pieces in place. The teams were not owning their process. That was one big mistake. And the second big mistake was that that we were doing too much stuff in parallel, and we didn't have these process rules in place when things are done, when things are ready, and so on. And this is where we are now. We still have issues, definitely. The main issue or main challenge for us is still right now how to bring a business more into the everyday engineering process. I mean, right now we have with them about 1 month planning cycle, but we want to cut it down. We want them to be in each of the sprint plannings. We want them to be available during the delivery, as well as in the demos that are basically then showing what has been achieved. Okay, so VYGANTAS, tell us then from your perspective how this transformation has been.
Yeah, my name is VYGANTAS. I'm the engineering manager for the sorting team, and as Martin mentioned, this was quite a big journey for Omniva to develop this new logistics system, and I will more focus on the experience that the teams had during this whole period, and how the things that Mart presented actually affected the teams. So as it was mentioned somewhere 3 years ago, there was a big project planned to replace the old logistics system with a new fancy one that would be microservices based, that will have a newest development stack for front-end, React backend will be done in Java, Spring framework. Everything would be running in the Docker images orchestrated by Kubernetes. And it was architected based on this technology stack, and all the teams were divided in producing those particular services based on early defined feature list. And the plan was that after like a couple of years, the system will be up and running, then the building will be built, a new location, a new big sorting line, new big fancy sorting line will be assembled there, and everything will be ready for Christmas for higher volumes, as volumes are rising each year. So what could go wrong, right? And as it was mentioned by Mark, that of course nothing happened as expected. So teams were working hard, they were delivering some working modules, but those modules were not interacting within themselves in the end-to-end perspective. So they could exchange data maybe with some couple of nearby modules, but the whole customer process from the beginning to end was not possible to succeed. And the reason for that is the scope that was planned. So the system should have replaced all functionalities with some modern geolocated systems, totally new parcel machines, totally new approach on the sorting, totally new approach on data entry, and everything was so new. And a lot of ideas by the company was to use this new system to drive the revenue, so they had a lot of expectation for that. And even if 80% of things were done, still nothing could be used for anything. So that where the first transformation came in, where the new product teams were established, and basically the scope was switched from fixed scope and variable resources on time to fixed product teams and then dynamic scope. But how to get this dynamic scope from this big project, which features are important, which not. So the engineering teams were brought to the to the logistics areas, to the sorting centers to look for themselves how actually the users are working with this old system, and what those fancy features would change into their process. And basically by themselves they could better understand how to actually implement the features, not by definition of what is expected, but by actually value delivery to the customer. So during that time period, it was decided to not take into the delivery for Christmas anything that is not related to the sorting center operations. So the new GIS system will be developed further, but not released live. The new fancy journey-based, let's say, logistics operations will also be postponed. So the focus was done just to get up and running the new system to work with this new sorting line and new logistics center. And as I said before, one of the key enablers for that was to do the value-based deliveries rather than the features from the list by the customers, and also make a very hard decision not to scrap the old system, but try to integrate it together with the system. So this minimum viable product was like defined by keeping only things that were useful for the end goal of the Christmas period. And that was a success, I would say. It allowed us to deliver the working system. The new logistics center opened on time. But during this opening, there was again very hands-on integrations with the system. As you can see, the sorting line is very big. It's around half a kilometer long. It has 400 output chutes. It has closed loop cross-belt technology. And on the same time, it has real-time data entry for AliExpress parcels, which come in without any customer information digitally. So to reduce all manual work, and as Mark mentioned, during this period of the startup of the center, with this new approach, it was possible to release several times per day new working software and work out this end-to-end customer experience from registering a parcel to sorting it in the sorting center and delivering into new parcel machines. But that is not it. So when the software is up and running, volumes are growing, how can we know that this line is operating well? Or does it bring value to the customers? Is it really better than it was before? So the data and analytics team was part of this organization, which are then providing real-time operational dashboards, which allow to monitor the quality of our modules. This one dashboard is just particular for this sorting center, but every team has also technical dashboard where they can monitor in real time any errors that modules are producing, any unexpected volumes, unexpected messages that are going. And based, as you can see, it sorts, now it says only 20,000, but it's not the whole day. It starts early in the morning, and the sorting ends early in the next morning again. So it is around 40,000 parcels per day. If there is just like 1% of parcels not sorting not sorting properly, then it is really affecting a lot of manual work and bringing down the value of the system, which helped to improve the overall process by 40%, helped to reduce human errors by reducing the manual handling of those parcels. But Omniva has not only in Tallinn the sorting center, it also opened sorting center Kaunas, and it serves all the region except Vilnius. Sorry about that. The sorting center for Vilnius is planned for next year. But it also has a dashboard, a real-time dashboard, which also helps to monitor its performance, its the errors, the problems, and based on the lessons we learned with the Tallinn sorting center, it was quite an easy effort to do this in Kaunas, and it was a breeze to do it in Riga this year. Previously, just to recap, the data was gathered offline into Excel sheets and was laid by 2 to 3 weeks, and which didn't allow for any real-time analysis. But now, besides the operational dashboards, all the data produced by the team is accumulated into business dashboards, which can properly show the trends about increasing the parcel counts, about increasing or decreasing quality, and the deliveries. So that's all from my side. Mart?
Yes, I just wanted to give you a few words still about the data and analytics part. This is actually our growth in parcel volumes. As you can see, this is quite heavy from, we have almost tripled our amounts in 7 to 8 years. But why data and analytics is very important in terms of the product organization is that the work of a product owner is very much about saying no, because there is always more demand that we can basically deliver. And previously we were very much about kind of starting everything, saying yes to everybody, yes, we'll take it into the progress. So we ended up with 20 stuff in progress, very few what comes next and very few done. Now this dynamic is changing because we're saying no better. So essentially now we have like a lot of stuff at the done column, quite few in progress, and again quite a lot in the next column. And why data and, or how data and analytics comes to play is that we can basically better explain why we are prioritizing like we're prioritizing. If by one feature or development we are affecting the delivery of 1.3 million parcels, but with the other then only 10,000 parcels, then we clearly prioritize the bigger impact. And data and analytics actually helps us to basically explain the decisions better. So we take a few questions as well.
So maybe a bit more technical question as not exactly what are you using, but how do you handle that data analytics?
What is the technology stack for data analytics? You want to take that, or I will take that? You want to take that? No? I think we have a data warehouse technology that is based on Vertica. On top, we are using mainly Power BI from Azure, but also on-prem installation as well. There are other things that are also useful for visualizing data, like Grafana, for instance, is used. VYGANTAS, maybe all the logging systems, we are, I think, mainly on Elastic and Kibana when it comes to log management, and Prometheus and Grafana as well, right? So things like that.
Okay, so we have a question. How is the communication between the product teams organized?
Good one, because that's the weak point. One thing that is guiding is the same thing that I talked about, is core principles that are helping in the communication. So nobody can say that this is done because we have already done it before. Then we can refer that this is not the way how we work. And so on the more practical manner, then we have these, I would say, weekly syncs between the product owners, where they basically just give a quick update where they are with their business initiatives. Is somebody blocking somebody? Is something expected from other teams, and so on. It's kind of a quick sync meeting. And then in context of each of the business initiative, basically the involved teams, they have their different routines. Some are doing daily stand-ups, some are doing weekly stand-ups, some are doing sprint plannings and so on. Maybe how is it working from your perspective?
Yeah, but for inter-team communication, for a bigger initiative that involves changes in several areas, the driver is assigned, which is basically from one of the team who has the most involvement into that feature, who is then trying to talk and get the input from other teams, how it will affect, how that feature will affect those teams, and try to build some epics with the included user stories for that.
Okay, go to next.
How did you secure buy-in for this fairly radical rearrangement of both process and organization, in such a legacy-heavy company?
There has been several different buy-ins. We call it hacking leadership. Basically, the first buy-in was through fear. So basically, no, everything will basically break down, and we will not be able to handle these increasing volumes with old systems. Basically, if you don't invest, you're going to die. That was the first buy-in. The second buy-in, which is, I think, fear is a good motivator, but for a very short amount of time. So the new buy-in that we're very much trying to build is through the same business outcomes, that we all commit, the business lines and the budget owners, as well as the technology organization, to improving some sort of business outcome. And that actually secures much better buy-in in the beginning, but that is not enough. We have to deliver in these small, up to 3 months pieces in order to show progress. That's the most important thing, to constantly show that something is improving, and it's improving daily, weekly, monthly. What is always the worst thing what can happen is that you go away and you do something for a year and nobody's actually seeing what you're doing, then the trust will go away. But how you basically keep that trust is that constantly showing that something is getting ready, some metrics are already moving, some value is already created. I think that's the core.
Okay, so the time is ended. I want to say thank you for our presenters who talked about this story. So give a applause for